Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for my team selector and preview ahead of tomorrow night's game at Stamford Bridge at home to Fulham in the Premier League. Must-win game, no excuses now for Thomas Tuchel's side. The amount of drop points we've had to teams we should have beaten is quite concerning in the Premier League. I think it's been that negative side against Southampton, against Brighton, against West Brom, against Leeds, where Chelsea, those games could cost us very dearly in the race for top four. Fulham, this is kind of their last chance, I think, to get survival in the Premier League this year. I mean, it looks unlikely right now, but it's kind of, they have to win tomorrow night. I think, even a point probably isn't good enough for them, given where we are in the Premier League season. We're going to get into team news, what Thomas Tuchel said in his press conference, looking at Fulham, and then also my predicted lineups going into what is a massive Premier League game for Chelsea in between a massive Champions League semi-final. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, do me a favour on this Friday by hitting that like button because it helps out the channel as well. So team news, Mateo Kovacic still out, and there was a hope he could have returned for this game, so that's going to create a big question mark in that double six that we'll get into when I go into my predicted lineups. And the other one is Antonio Rudiger, out for this game and is now a doubt for Wednesday's second leg against Real Madrid. A big miss. Even though you could have seen Tuchel rotate and give Rudy a rest in this game, he has been a big player since Thomas Tuchel has arrived. I mean, his form has been wonderful. I think if you were to just measure the in-form players since Thomas Tuchel has arrived, I think Rudiger's right up there. He really is one of the top players. He wasn't involved against West Brom, that 5-2 defeat, so he didn't play at all that night. So really, when you just isolate down his performances, this is some of the best form of his Chelsea career. And those injuries could be really costly. And it's just a shame because, these are all big games for Chelsea. Rudiger has been one of the best players under Thomas Tuchel. His concentration level, his form, his aggression, I just think all round his game has been so fine-tuned under Thomas Tuchel in that back three. All the positive elements of his game have come to the fore, and it's really helped Chelsea have that stable defence. So, of course, there's going to be rotation there, and let's hope Rudiger and Kova can be back for Real Madrid. It seems more likely Rudiger could be back, but as we saw with Kova and as we see with injuries recently, they seem to go on a little bit longer than we expect. So hopefully Rudiger can return, and there are big question marks for who replaces those two players. In particular, a guaranteed basically starter in big games in Antonio Rudiger for this game tomorrow. But as I said, no excuse. I think after the massive win against West Ham last weekend, where we got points against one of our direct rivals, our closest rival in the race for top four, we have to win this game. I think that the drop points against teams recently has been really frustrating, and has made the situation a lot more intense going into these remaining games. If buts and maybes at this time of the season, but if we would have beaten West Brom, if we would have beaten Brighton, just those two games, you think about how healthier the situation could have looked. But it's one of those games where Tuchel has done so much great work in big games. Chelsea seem to master big games. I have so much trust with Thomas Tuchel in massive games now. When we face teams like Fulham, it's one of those games where you have to question the mentality a bit more and have a little bit more concern, because sometimes the intensity level isn't there, and it's where we've dropped most of our points under Thomas Tuchel so far. And of course, with the short period of time between games at the moment, it's all about rotation, and Tuchel knowing that any decision could really cost him, bringing in a player who hasn't played that much, rotating fitness levels, prioritising maybe that Champions League semi-final against Real Madrid, it really makes things tricky. But still, Chelsea, a rotated side tomorrow, I expect to be getting the job done against Fulham, who are nearly down to the Championship. And let's look at Fulham, really their last chance to fight for survival. I think Scott Parker's done a really good job this season to get them to a place where they could have survived. They've just had some really difficult breaks, I think. I've watched them in games where they've looked good at times. They've even led in some games, but they've conceded late goals. They've been on top of games and then had like 2 or 3 minutes where they've conceded a couple. That's what sort of killed them off here. And I also just think that the bulk of their squad just isn't Premier League level, and I think that's been pretty obvious pretty much since the summer, to be honest. I think we knew that Fulham were going to have a struggle to stay up, but I think Scott Parker as a coach this season, big wins at Anfield, some really good points away from home, point away at the Emirates. They were like seconds away from winning at the Emirates last time out in the Premier League. I think he deserves a lot of credit. But as you see there, their form, no win in their last 5, which could be a bad omen going into Chelsea tomorrow. But I think that, Fulham, this really is their last chance, which actually could help Chelsea tactically, because it may force Fulham to be a little bit more expansive than they would be, because they're in a place of desperation at this point. They need to score goals. So that may change the complexion of the game and may give Chelsea a little bit more space for our attackers. And actually, Fulham's away form in the Premier League has been pretty decent for a team in that position. It's their home form that has really let them down. And tactically, I think going into this game, will Scott Parker stick with the 4-4-2 that he used last time out at the Emirates? Last time Chelsea played Fulham back in January, I think they were with a 3-back system at the time. They've switched to a 4-4-2, which, as I'll get into, I think really helps Chelsea going into this game. If it is narrow, if it is open, I think that allows Chelsea to have quite a bit of space to attack and hopefully create a lot of havoc for Fulham at Stamford Bridge tomorrow night. I just want to comment on Thomas Tuchel spoke about Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Of course, won't be featuring tomorrow night, but has been on loan all season at Fulham and sort of getting back to fitness and just sort of his future at Chelsea. Does Ruben have a future at Chelsea? This is what he had to say. It's not decided yet. I was a fan of him when he was younger. Reminded me a little bit of Michael Ballack. We were well aware of him and his talent. It would absolutely be unfair if I judge him from TV. I love to work with players and give my opinion. So maybe just a little bit of light there at the end of the tunnel for Ruben Loftus-Cheek, that he could be back in the summer and get an opportunity in pre-season. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a massive fan of Ruben, and the opportunity for him to return to Chelsea and get one more opportunity under Tuchel would be great. But I think it's unlikely at this point. The amount of investment Chelsea have, players like Mason Mount as well, just really nailing down the position and getting minutes. And you think about Kai Havertz, the amount of midfielders we have. I mean, I just worry Ruben with his injuries. Has it just gone past the point now of no return? And despite, I think it's going to take a lot for a club to buy Ruben permanently, I think he may just be out on loan once again. But we'll see in the summer. But I just wanted to bring that up because that was quite interesting based on Ruben's future, that I do get asked a lot of questions from you guys about. But let's get into this predicted lineup, and 2 predicted lineups once again, and sort of gauging what Tuchel's going to do, how much he's going to rotate, how much I think he should rotate. Sort of the basis for this Premier League game for me, and sort of the performance I want to see tomorrow, is Crystal Palace away from home. And the intensity of that game, the attacking fluidity of that performance, the switches of play from left to right, the pressing, moving the ball so swiftly from midfield in sort of all facets. That was such an impressive performance, in particular in that first half an hour, blowing Crystal Palace away. And sure, we can look back at that game and go, Crystal Palace, sort of on the beach, their season sort of done. We're playing a team in Fulham who are a lot more desperate. They still have something to play for. It's not going to be that same sort of vibe, I guess, Crystal Palace compared to Fulham. But I still think that type of game, I want to see that intensity from Chelsea, because this is a big game for Chelsea. It's a must-win game. We need to start on the front foot. So going into my first lineup here, there has to be rotation. Firstly, Zuma, I think, will come into the back 3 here alongside Dave and Christensen. I'd like to give a rest to Thiago Silva. I think that we have so much trust in Andreas Christensen. Dave moving into that back 3 once more, and I just think that Kurt Zuma, in particular, set pieces once again, his ability at set pieces, I think, is something we desperately lack, and also could be really helpful for Chelsea in defending set pieces in the second leg if Tuchel decides to use Zuma in that game as well. As you can see here in my first lineup, we got Callum Hudson-Odoi at right wing back. Think about that performance against Crystal Palace where Callum played at right wing back as well, and what he's able to do and influence the game against deeper opposition. He's able to press up the pitch so high, basically playing as a right winger. In Chelsea, that outlet from left to right, when we move the ball and shift it so quickly, you usually find Callum in space, in particular against a narrow back 4 which Crystal Palace had. If Fulham are playing with a narrow back 4 and Chelsea can isolate, Fulham and sort of expose some space, I think Callum will have a lot of joy, and I think this is the perfect game to bring him back, to give him some minutes once again if you want to rotate. Of course, Reece James didn't start against Real Madrid, did come off the bench, so you could argue, could he start this game here? But I'd prefer him to be rested and fresh for the game against Real Madrid on Wednesday, because I think he could play a massive part offensively for Chelsea. So I think this is a time to bring Callum Hudson-Odoi in. You look at that double 6, and I've put Billy Gilmour here. Tuchel said there is a chance, but he hasn't given Gilmour any chances in the Premier League so far. So I would still say it's an outside shout. The reason why is Gilmour, I just think he deserves an opportunity here. I think it makes sense. I'd much more prefer Billy Gilmour as a natural number 8 or a number 6, someone in the centre of the park, rather than shifting and forcing Mason Mount to that double 6 position. Even though it's a game Chelsea are going to be dominant in, I prefer Mason further up the pitch. Personally, I think he has much more influence. He's done so well under Thomas Tuchel and is so effective in the way we play. So I prefer Mason in that position rather than as a number 6, where I think his game is a lot more limited. I think Mason, if he's to play in a midfield role a little bit deeper, as we saw earlier in the season under Frank Lampard, I think as a number 8 in, say, a 4-3-3, where you can sort of, you have a mixture of both there, where he isn't really a number 10, but isn't a number 6. I think in this double 6, Tuchel wants these players a lot more deeper against a wide variety of opposition. And I just think as well, Gilmour's daring on the ball. He's swift with the ball out from his feet. He wants to move it quickly, and that's what Chelsea need in a game like this. They need intensity with the ball at their feet, and it comes from that double 6. They very much set the tone and tempo, positively or negatively, and I think we need a fast tempo tomorrow. And I also think Gilmour will play those daring passes out from his feet. They won't always work, but I could see him playing a switch, behind the back of Fulham's defence to Callum Hudson-Odoi potentially, and how daring and dangerous that can be to maybe break down a stubborn Fulham defence. So that's why I'd like to see Billy Gilmour given an opportunity in this game. In my second lineup, I've just put Mount there alongside Jorginho if Tuchel still doesn't trust him there. And of course, you could play N'Golo Kante here. I just want to protect N'Golo Kante for that second leg because we know the injury record of N'Golo Kante. We know the struggles he has fitness-wise. And I think there is a chance to rest N'Golo Kante here. Despite it being a big game in the Premier League, it's a game I expect Chelsea to dominate the ball. And I prefer keeping Kante fit. The worst thing we can do is overuse Kante. He gets injured and he's out for the rest of the season. So I'd prefer to potentially bring Gilmour back in here, rest N'Golo Kante for that massive Champions League second leg where we're going to need him against Real Madrid. But then we go into that front three, and obviously in the first lineup here you can see Mount, Pulisic, Havertz. That was the front three that worked against Crystal Palace, and I do think Kai should come back in here because it's quite clear that Tuchel, I'd be stunned if Tammy Abraham or Olivier Giroud is starting this game. I'd love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I think that Kai Havertz, as we saw his movement against Crystal Palace that night, was so wonderful. The way he moved and sort of caused havoc, create space, dropping deeper. That front three, the way it worked together. Christian Pulisic is in such good goal form at the moment. You want him on the pitch if you can have him. Yes, there could be an argument to rest him here, but this is still a big Premier League game. We need goals. We need to finish this off, this game. Chelsea need to bury Fulham tomorrow night. So I'd have Christian Pulisic because he's just in such great form. And that front three works so wonderfully alongside Callum Hudson-Odoi too, as you sort of an attacking four up there with Ben Chilwell as the left wing back too. I'd still have Ben Chilwell over Marcos Alonso, even for a game of this nature where I expect Chelsea to dominate. I still think Ben Chilwell for me is my first choice left wing back, and there is that time between games to rest. I think that Chilwell will keep his place. The second predicted lineup is mainly bringing back Hakim Ziyech as well. You see Reece James in here as well. I've already spoken about James, but Hakim Ziyech, I can expect him to start this game too, so that may, obviously, derail my idea of reuniting Mount, Kai and Pulisic. So I think that Ziyech could come in here potentially for Mount or Pulisic. It's a bit of a shame because I think both of those players are in such good form at the moment. But Ziyech, the way Tuchel spoke about Ziyech, he didn't start against West Ham. He didn't play against... Oh, no, he did come off the bench against West Ham. He came off the bench against Real Madrid. So I suspect him to start this game, given his freshness, given his ability potentially on the ball to create something. There has been a sense in recent games, the Man City game in particular, he is finding a little bit of confidence once again. So hopefully if he does start in this game, he can take his opportunity. Those are my two starting lineups. It's going to be a massive, massive game for Chelsea, as they all are. I think I should stop saying that now because they all are basically cup finals. They all are must-win games in what is a defining month of our season in the Premier League and the Champions League and the FA Cup. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.